the Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian Wars. We'll be starting off talking about the three main battles of the Persian Wars, and then we'll talk about how Sparta and Athens, despite the fact that they team up during the Persian Wars, are going to decide to fight each other in the Peloponnesian War. Now, just a background, the two dudes that you want to know that are huge historians are Herodotus and Thucydides. Herodotus is called the father of history. He's known very near and dear to my heart because he's basically the first historian. He's the first guy that goes and truly tries to semi-objectively describe events the way they happen. And then Thucydides is going to pick up after Herodotus and describe a lot of the history that we have of the Greco-Persian Wars. Now, the cause of the Persian Wars, or the Greco-Persian Wars, Greece, Greco, Persia, Persian, Persia, is the Ionian Revolt. I'll show you on the next slide where Ionia is. Ionia was basically a region in modern-day Turkey that the Persians were in control of. And what happened was the Persians had installed a bunch of tyrants. And as we look back, you can look at the Unit 2 videos if you forget, but the Persian Empire used satrapies as their form of running their empire. Kind of let people do their own things as long as they paid their taxes. Little problem with that, though, however, is when the people in the area don't like the ruler. And what happened is the Ionian Greeks went and overthrew essentially the tyrants. And we learned that the Persians ruled with a velvet glove, but with an iron fist. So they came down hard. And what happened was other Greeks went and supported the Ionians, specifically Athens. And when that happened, Persia got really mad because they said, "Why are you messing with our territory? It's none of your business." And that's where they're going to essentially go, and the Persians are going to attack the Greeks because of their interference in Ionia. Darius is the Persian king at the time, and he's the one that takes over the Ionian cities. The symbolic sign of surrender is earth and water, and if you've seen 300, you know that. And they basically start sending messengers over. And if you know, good old Leonidas kicks the messenger down the well. Some go, that says Persians, I know it's cut off, sorry. Some go and seek an alliance with the Persians. You have the little city-states in Greece that say, "I'd rather go sign a treaty with you and become a client state than go and fight you." And you have the unlikely, awkward couple of Athens and Sparta. And the textbook does a good job describing the differences between the two, but you could not get any more different than these two cultures. Athens are the thinkers, the lovers, all this stuff, and Sparta is the Sparta. They're militaristic, and everything revolves around that. They go, and their women are tough, their kids are tough. Sparta is a pretty fierce place back then. Now, where's Ionia? Ionia is basically over here. And then if you look, Attica, which is where Athens is, Marathon, Thermopylae, which we'll talk about, and then here's Sparta down here. This is, you've already done the Greek map, but here's the Peloponnese. That's why we call it the Peloponnesian War. And then you can take a pause here. These are, as it says, their military operations during the Ionian Revolt. Now, the first of the three main battles that you need to know is the Battle of Marathon. Now, essentially what had happened was the Athenians were outnumbered 2.5 to 1, as you can see there, according to Herodotus, and they were going to lose the battle. And they basically went and they were going to get reinforcements, backup, support from the Spartans. The Spartans were doing their religious ceremony, so they had to wait 10 days. So there's kind of a stalemate where both troops are basically going and lining up with each other, just kind of facing each other. And after 5 days, at some point, the Persians go and start moving their horses away from the battlefield. And the Athenians freak out because they think that they're going to go and start attacking the city of Athens, which is mostly unguarded at that point. So at that point, the Athenian lines are going to go rush the Persians, and it's an amazing, miraculous victory. They are obviously outnumbered, so they're not supposed to win on paper. But their hoplites are better armed, better trained than the lightly armed infantry of the Persians. Where were the Spartans? Like I said, they were at their ceremony. And they win. And the more myth than history is the story of this guy, Philippides, which is the origin of the modern length of marathon, like 26.2 miles. What happened was he basically went and announced, he had to run from the marathon battlefield to Athens to announce the victory. And when he got up to announce victory, he said, "Nike, victory," and he collapsed over and died. So that's kind of the legend, and that's where we get the length. If you ever wonder, why did we get the length of a marathon that long? That's where it comes from. This is actually a large funeral mound that had a bunch of soldiers that were buried there. Kind of crazy. And here he is bringing the good news, and then he dies. Second one, everybody's favorite, Thermopylae. Thermopylae literally means hot gates. Thermo means hot. The oracle, the Pythia of Delphi, makes a prediction that they're either going to lose their city or one of their kings. And if you know the story, they're going to lose one of their kings. The Persian leader, Darius, dies and his son takes over. His name's Xerxes. And then the Greek leader, his name is Leonidas. He's the king of the Spartans. It's just not the 300 Spartans. There are other Greeks, but if you look at those numbers, you have 250,000 Persians versus 7,000 Greeks. You can guess who's going to win the battle. It is a Greek loss, but the more important point is that the Spartans are known for their bravery in the battle, all of them fighting until death. And they actually relatively held them off for a while, which is quite amazing in and of itself. What happened here is it basically went and fired up the Greeks because it united them behind these very, very brave Spartans. And if you see 300, they kind of emphasize that point, that they're fighting only for honor and glory and all those very, very important Spartan points. And if you know the story as well, there was a traitor who essentially showed the Persians kind of like a shepherding, like a goat path around that allowed them to basically cut off the forces. And he was a greedy little guy that make him look like a hunchback in the movie. But that's the Battle of Thermopylae. Thermopylae, back in the day, the Gulf would have extended out here, and this is what it looks like. Today, this is what it looks like, so you can take a little peek there. There's Leonidas in battle, painting of the famous Spartan leader. Now the third one is Salamis. Salamis is a naval battle, meaning it occurs on the sea. Now they go to the Pythia again, and she says her advice is to surround Athens with the wooden walls. So they build a bunch of wooden walls around Athens. And at the same time, Athens goes and they actually find a large silver mine. And they're like, what are we going to do with all this silver? So they decide to put it on the front of their ships, basically as a battering ram. And on the front of their wooden ships, they'll go and use the battering ram to hopefully sink Persian ships. Well, they go and they meet in this big battle. And the Greeks are going to go and start smashing the Persian ships. And they kick some major butt. Now they go and they look at the oracle's interpretation. They go, oh, she didn't mean walls around the city. She meant wooden walls metaphorically. She kind of meant the wooden walls of the ships, which you really wouldn't think are walls. But the Pythia is always right, as we learned. So that's kind of the legend there. And this isn't the last battle of the Greco-Persian Wars. There's Plataea after. But this is the last big one. This essentially goes and annihilates the Persians from the Greek mainland. And they're going to basically be chased back to Persia. And we'll talk about how they go in and start following them. Now, Athens goes and gets really greedy. They go and they form like an old school form of NATO or the UN called the Delian League, which is named after the island Delos, where they make the league. It's an anti-Persian league. And what they do is they say, oh, our goal is to go and free the Ionian city-states, which are still under Persian control. So they start chasing basically Persians back to Persia. And Athens goes and does something a little bit strange. As they go and free cities from Persian occupation, they become the new occupiers. They start having their empire because they're just not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it to form their empire. And as they do this, they create their own little mini empire and they have to start charging people taxes, etc., etc. Now, in and of itself, that's not that big of a deal. But what's going to happen is the Spartans have their own league, which is called the Peloponnesian League, which has all their allies, city-states. And all of a sudden, when Athens starts interfering with some of the Spartan city-states, that's going to set off the civil war, the Peloponnesian War. So this is the Peloponnesian War, which is a civil war, and it's a war between Sparta and Athens. Persia sits on the sideline, is laughing the whole time. First they support Sparta, and then they support Athens. So they're just trying to weaken each other. And who eventually wins the Peloponnesian War is going to be the Spartans, which is like not a big, not hard to guess because it's the Spartans, so they're pretty awesome at military type stuff. They're going to defeat the Athenians. And the long-term effect is really it just weakens this part of Greece. Persia goes and eventually regains control of Ionia, which is basically back where we started. And this is one of the reasons when we get to Alexander, why Alexander's been able to conquer Greece relatively easily, because those areas had been weakened over a period of time. So good old Peloponnesian War and the Persian Wars.